Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you, wherever you are joining us from. And welcome to Wigtown Book Festival. For anyone who is confused, it is evening here, but we, I think, are being joined by people from all over the world. My name is Philippa. I'm really excited to be chairing this event with the always excellent Juno Dawson to talk about her new book, Wonderland. Juno, give us a quick wave just for a sec. Obviously, things are a bit different at Wigtown Book Festival this year, and I just want to start by saying thank you to the Hollywood Trust for supporting this event and the Wigtown YA programme. It's really great to be able to bring you fantastic book events in spite of all the challenges of 2020. This is a YA, a young adult event, so please think about what you're posting in the comments, who might be in the audience, and be respectful with whatever you put out there. If you've got any concerns, you can reach out to the event moderators. In a moment, I am going to properly introduce Juno, not just ask her to give you a little wave. I'm sure she's raring to get started. Usually for an author event, we would chat for a bit and then take the last 20 minutes or so to answer your questions. But because we can't see you all, and that feels a bit weird, we would love to get a bit of interaction going with you guys earlier on in the event. So once we've done an intro and Juno's going to read a small extract, she and I will start a conversation. If you want to ask anything at any point, just type your question into the chat box and we will come to them. We will also still make a bit of dedicated space at the end to answer questions as well. So having said all of that, sorry, lots of intro housekeeping-y stuff. Without further ado, originally from West Yorkshire, Juno Dawson is a novelist, screenwriter, journalist, and columnist whose work has been published in the likes of Glamour, The Pool, Dazed, The Guardian, BBC Women's Hour, Front Row, This Morning, and Newsnight. That is as diverse a list of publications and broadcasters as you are going to find on anyone's CV. She is one of the school role models for Stonewall. She has been crowned by the book people as Queen of Teen, which is still my favourite title. And having fulfilled a lifelong ambition to write for Doctor Who with her novel, The Good Doctor, she has also written non-fiction, including This Book is Gay and Mind Your Head, unflinching YA fiction, including Clean and Meat Market, The Gender Games, a memoir for adults, and edited LGBTQ+ anthology Proud. For this event, we will be talking about her YA novel, Wonderland. I will flash this several times during this event. Juno, welcome. It's so lovely to have you with us.
Hello. It's lovely to be back. I mean, the last time I was at Wigtown was, I think, in 2017, and it will forever be in my memory because the green room served lobster. You don't forget that. I've never been served lobster anywhere else at any of the myriad book events that I've done. I will never forget the lobster.
It is a different kind of festival, Wigtown, it has to be said. So before we do anything else, you're going to give us a quick reading, and then you and I are going to launch into some questions.
I'm going to do a very, very short reading from Wonderland. Don't fall asleep. I realise it's nearly bedtime in the United Kingdom, but try to stay away. So Wonderland is the story, well, we're going to talk about it a lot, but it's a version of Alice in Wonderland. And the book starts where Alice is distressed because her kind of crush, Bunny, has gone missing. And this excerpt gives just a little taste of who Bunny Liddell is. In any other world, an 18-year-old vanishing without trace for a week would be cause for great alarm, but this is London high society. Last summer, so it said, Bunny Liddell flew to her parents' beach house in Ibiza for the whole of August without telling a soul until she turned up on a podium at Pasha. The winter before that, she was found after a frantic search in her aunt's Chamonix ski lodge toasting marshmallows with Lady Louise Windsor. Bunny goes and comes back. But I may well be the last person to have seen her, or the second to last person to have seen her alive. Oh, it aches. I so clearly remember waking up in the king-size hotel bed and being the only person in it. Just a little sneaky taster.
Little sneaky taste. So I normally start these events by saying we're going to try and get through this without spoilers. I am going to do my very best, but I am making no promises, lovely people. But I think this is such a great book, and there's so much in it that people will be surprised by it at every turn, even if we let a few little things slip as we go.
Yeah, oh, it's fine. It's fine. I mean, and it's a retelling. So I think the great thing about Wonderland is that, if you are vaguely familiar with Alice in Wonderland, and I'm wearing my Wonderland sweatshirt tonight as well, if you are vaguely familiar with Alice in Wonderland, you kind of know what you're getting into, but it's also entirely its own thing as well.
So that's where I wanted to start, actually. I was really interested to know, because we all grew up with Alice in Wonderland in one form or another. What was it that made you want to retell it? And how is your Alice like the Alice you remember?
She isn't Alice that you know and love. I mean, the whole thing started... Paul Philippa, by the way, who also chaired me at Edinburgh International Book Festival. So as we've had this conversation, but I'm still going to try my very best to surprise and delight you, Philippa. It's going to be wild. So it all kicked off when I was in Melbourne promoting my previous novel, Clean. I had some downtime, and I met up with a friend who lives out there now, and we went to the most beautiful museum exhibit at a place called the Australian Centre for Cultural Arts. And it was all about visual representations of Alice in Wonderland, from, the original photographs of the real life Alice Liddell to the illustrations in the Lewis Carroll version, and then all the various film adaptations as well. And I just started thinking about, everyone has retold this story. It's been retold a million different ways. Tim Burton has done it, and The Matrix could be regarded as like a retelling of Alice in Wonderland. And so I kind of thought, what would the Juno Dawson Alice be like? I've written, this is like my 10th novel, I think, and I was interested to kind of work out, almost like a thought experiment for myself, what is it that I do? And the nice thing about Alice is that she's such a blank canvas. All these versions, and we don't know a lot about her. We know she's curious, and she, I guess, likes white rabbits. And that there wasn't really a lot to go on. So I sort of tried to delve deeper into kind of who she is, and more importantly, why she does the things she does. Because if we go back to the original, it's a story about a girl who, chases after a rabbit for no reason. She's quite passive in the story, in that she's kind of moved from encounter to encounter without really much agency. And then in the end, she kind of goes up against the Queen of Hearts out of a sense of morality, which is she senses that the Queen of Hearts, who is obviously like a dictator, that what she's doing is wrong. And so Alice kind of gets involved. And that kind of struck me as something that's quite resonant with the teenagers today, which is, if you look at somebody like Greta Thunberg, she is a teenage girl who is going up against, the biggest powers in the world, for no other reason than that because it's the right thing to do, and she perceives it as the right thing to do. And so that was kind of the starting point. But from that point on, it really was just, really super good fun to kind of take something that we all know and love and just completely put my spin on it.
You really do put your spin on it. I was thinking about this today as I was going back through the book to prep for the event. Obviously, you've gone in a really different direction from the original. I would argue that your Wonderland is at heart a thriller, possibly even a small p political thriller, as in it's about politics of a group, of a microcosm of society. How did you decide what new shape your version was going to take?
It was a few little things. So there were elements of Wonderland that were originally going to live in other books. particularly the character of Paisley. Originally, she was going to be somewhere else in a different title. I don't want to give too much away about the twist, but there was some stuff about Paisley's background that I was going to use in a different novel. And then when I had that idea in Melbourne, I thought, well, this is she could be your Queen of Hearts. She was already ready in my head. The rest of it, I think you're right. It's political. I didn't start out with that in mind. I started out with the same things that anyone would. So I started out with a White Rabbit, I started out with a Mad Hatter and a Cheshire Cat and a Queen of Hearts, and then started thinking, in my sort of world, how would those things manifest and how would they be? So there was never any danger that there was going to be talking animals, for example. There really was going to be kind of like a sort of Gossip Girl or Euphoria-esque version, although it's funny because Wonderland kind of came before Euphoria, but I think weirdly they have quite a lot in common in that they really are about sort of that nihilistic, hedonistic, and kind of club culture that, of course, none of us can enjoy at the moment. So there wouldn't be a Wonderland this year; it would have been cancelled.
That's very true. That is very, very true.
Maybe they would have gone ahead, because I think they're quite. The rules don't apply. So actually,
well, also it would just be an excuse to make the whole thing last a fortnight rather than a few days.
Exactly. I did see, obviously, during the summer there has been like reports on the news of like mass raves taking place. I think there was one near Manchester and there was one near Bristol as well. And so, when I see things like that, I'm sort of reminded that teenagers or young people have always created their own subcultures. And that was kind of my inspiration for Wonderland. I wanted it to be like this very exclusive, kind of secretive, kind of underground party.
Absolutely. So then we navigate that through Alice. We see that through Alice. But the book is, God, as much about Alice's journey to her own identity as it is about what's going on around her. And in fact, one of the characters at one point even asks her, who is Alice? And she doesn't know. Can you talk a little bit about that journey to self and what you think makes it compelling reading, particularly, I guess, within YA fiction?
I think that is a hallmark of young adult fiction. I think they are usually transformative novels, but I think there are a few times in your life that are more transformative than your teenage years. The person you are at 13 is not the person you are at 19. And I think that's why I keep coming back to young adult fiction, and why, both young adults and older adults enjoy reading them, because, if you've been through your teenage years, then I think you can sympathize with the characters in these novels who are very much kind of figuring themselves out. And that's something that certainly, it's a like a schema, if you like, that has appeared in a number of my novels, kind of about characters who are on some sort of like trajectory to come to some sort of understanding about who it is they're going to be. I think I've thought long and hard about, is my affinity for young adult fiction anything to do with my own personal transition? And maybe there was a little bit in that, but I was keen with Alice that strangely, actually, the big transition that she goes on in this novel is nothing to do with her gender, even though she is trans herself.
Absolutely. I'm going to come on to a further question about that. I'm just going to stop to remind everyone watching that if they want to start asking questions, they're more than welcome to, because otherwise I'm just going to get to ask all the questions I want to ask, and I have 2 pages of these things. So, get in quickly, folks. Sort of building on that idea, and because we are post-Watershed, it is after 9 o'clock. This is definitely fiction for young adults. You embrace Alice's sexuality. You write really frankly about her sex life over the course of the book. Can you talk a little bit about Alice's connections, physical and emotional, with other people, and the role they play in her ability to connect with herself?
Yes, I can. And that's because it's a really important feature of the book. And, Patrick Ness, just drop a name. Patrick Ness is a friend of mine, and he read the book quite early on. And he said it's so important that LGBTQ youth are able to see characters who are shameless, because there is still in this world such great shame doled out on LGBTQ youth. There is still the suggestion that your lives are not the norm, and that your relationships and that your bodies are not the norm. And so actually, and when I've written trans characters in this novel and in Clean as well, people think that I'm writing from experience, but actually both Alice and Kendall, my trans characters, have lives that I did not have, in that they both transitioned very young, and they both sort of, in a way, I dodged a bullet in that I didn't transition while I was at high school, and both Alice and Kendall did. And I wanted Alice to do a lot of soul searching, but the one thing that she doesn't question is that she's a girl. And that is somewhat true of me, which is actually my gender has kind of, and how I've seen myself in my head has been really consistent since I was 3 or 4 years old. How I am now is kind of how I imagined I would be when I was a kid. Alice is more surprised and is more compelled by her feelings for Bunny, who is her first love connection. And Bunny is one of the most popular girls at school, whereas Alice is far from it. And I think Alice initially is quite starstruck by Bunny and the fact that Bunny has paid her any attention. Although as we get to know Bunny, we realise that she is a narcissist and potentially Bunny is only really interested in Bunny, if we're honest. But then in the way that Alice in the Lewis Carroll version kind of moves from random encounter to random encounter, so does Alice, only my Alice's encounters are rather more sexual. And, sometimes in life, that is kind of how it happens. And, I've had these kind of lost weekends where you kind of, and this, I'm so old now, but, we're sort of going back into my 20s, where thinking back over, like, I've never been to like a festival quite like Wonderland, because I don't do camping. It's just a personal rule. But I'm thinking back to like Pride weekends, like a Brighton Pride weekend, where you would kind of go out on Thursday night and you almost wouldn't get home until Sunday night. And I kind of wanted to capture that kind of vibe in Wonderland, just this massive weekend. And Alice, so she starts out looking for Bunny, but then she, she has both positive and negative encounters in terms of sex. And that was something that I think YA should be doing more of. And I mean both, because I think actually YA has quite effectively looked at the darker side of sex, looking at kind of rape and sexual assault and a surprising number of affairs with teachers. It's not okay. Whereas I think one thing that we don't do as well is looking at healthy and positive sexual relationships. And so I've tried, certainly with my last two, Meat Market and Wonderland, to portray really positive, consensual sexual experiences. So again, no spoilers, but over the course of the novel, Alice, as she kind of ricochets from ridiculous encounter to ridiculous encounter, she meets up with various characters that she kind of develops feelings for or just has a great time with. And that's, I think, part of being young. And even Paisley Hart, who's kind of the villain, even she talks about the importance of consent. And I think
I loved that. I loved that even with the clear big bad of the piece. Consent was a thing. I really, that made me very happy. And also that she does have at least one bad encounter, but actually she also finds a lot of acceptance and joy in her encounters with folk, and I really enjoyed that. And you're right, it's not shown often, and it's nice that it's there. I have a question from the audience. I'm very excited.
Love it. Interactive. How modern.
Oh, I know. Hi, I'm going to read this out. Hi, my name's Rosalie. I was wondering how you came up with the complex personalities of the characters in Wonderland.
I like to think this is Rosalie from the Twilight franchise.
She
is real and sending me questions. Do you know, I will say this, I'm not much of a planner when it comes to character. I plan my plots very carefully because I think I would get very lost if I didn't plan the plot. But I do like to let the characters kind of speak to me and listen to them. And I know that sounds crazy, but for example, to begin with Maxim Hattersley, who is kind of the Mad Hatter character, he was going to be much more obnoxious and much less pleasant. But actually, very early on, he kind of just became this big softy. He's kind of harmless. He's disappointing in lots of ways, but he's also kind of harmless. And that was kind of a surprise. I think it was recently I looked back and I realised that the key characters they're all messed up. And that's quite true of a lot of my novels, and because who isn't messed up? But they do neatly align with different personality disorders. But that was honestly by accident. Like, strangely, initially Bunny was going to be much sweeter, but actually she is a terrible self-involved narcissist. Paisley is a sociopath. Maxim is self-destructive. Each of them, has their, I guess, their demons. Alice, I guess something that I do have in common with Alice is that there was possibly a period in both of our lives where we regarded our transitions as being a bit of a magic wand. And, writing Alice, 4 years into my transition, I realised that, your baggage comes with you, it gets on the plane and it goes on the journey. And, I've talked a lot about sort of my anxiety. I was anxious before my transition. I'm still anxious now. And that was something I wanted to explore with Alice. And I wonder if that's one of the reasons why, that there is so much sort of emphasis now on own voices and having diverse authors writing diverse characters, because I like to think that as a trans writer, you can kind of bring your lived experience to the table. I'm not saying that only trans authors should write trans characters, but I did think to myself, if you're not gonna tell trans stories, then nobody else will.
I think you're absolutely right about that, and I think it is really important, and I think it's a joy to see it happening more. There's a whole, we all know this, there's a whole ton of a way to go, but it's lovely to see that it's happening. I have a question about privilege, which I was going to ask later on, but I'm going to bump it up because I think it's an interesting thing that you do. The novel takes place in this very privileged microcosm, to use that word again, of society. And it seemed to me, when I was reading the book, that of all the types of privilege Alice encounters, and she does, and she is much more aware of privilege than the other characters in the book, it seems that extreme wealth is by far the most dangerous and least challenged of privileges. What would you like someone reading Wonderland to come away thinking about?
Anarchy. Well, authors, and I've said this a gazillion times, we do not write in vacuums. You know, I was writing this book in the run-up to a general election in which we had potentially the most kind of dichotic politics in a generation, in that for the first time we, you know, and it's, you know, we now have a far right leader, or the alternative was a far left leader. And I was so inspired by that sort of grassroots swell of support behind Jeremy Corbyn. I don't think he was perfect. And actually, I wasn't the biggest kind of sort of like Corbynista, or whatever you want to call it. You know, I think it's I don't think politics should ever be about personalities. I think that's how we've kind of got into this mess, actually, in all kinds of places around the world. I think we need politicians and parties, not personalities. But I was really inspired by seeing 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old activists really getting behind socialism and talking about socialism in a way that I just wouldn't have when I was 16. And maybe that's a sign of the times. Maybe apathy just isn't an option anymore. And, you know, Alice is the ultimate social justice warrior. You know, like I say, she gets involved for no reason. And that, to me, feels very current.
For sure. I think to follow on from that, your book centralizes perspectives that have previously and historically been othered and left on the margins. We're sort of talking around this. How do you think writing for YA audience can subvert those mainstream narratives now? And what role does it have to play in that kind of activism engaged arena that we've got to be thinking about?
Well, I mean, I think YA has always been incredibly subversive. I mean, when you look at a book like Philip Pullman's His Dark Materials, which takes on the church in a way that few adult novels would have gotten away with. And I think as young adult fiction, we kind of slide under the radar. You know, look at the Hunger Games. You know, I don't know if I needed that fourth book, if I'm entirely honest, but, you know, at the end of Mockingjay, massive spoiler coming, but I think enough time has passed now. You know, at the end of Mockingjay, Katniss shoots down society. She sees, you know, that when, is it Coin? When Coin steps up to be the new world leader, she recognizes she's replaced one regime with another. And actually what needs to be destroyed is the system. And, you know, it's like when Daenerys says, you know, I need to break the wheel. And I think that's something that young YA fiction has done really, really well, which is there is something quite revolutionary about it. And I think, if I'm being really honest, what we need is a revolution. And that's, you know, Alice says that. She says literally in the last, I mean, spoilers, but she says, you know, I'm going to go dust off the guillotine. And, you know, it didn't happen with Corbyn. But when I look at sort of some new young politicians coming up, I do see hope. And that's something that I feel good about, which is when I look at young activists, I feel like it's a shame. I wish we could get there faster. Like, obviously, we've had news about gender recognition in the United Kingdom this week, you know, and after 3 years of political turmoil in which, you know, trans lives were absolutely put on pause. And, you know, we've had, you know, the word transgender has been dragged through the press in such a toxic and negative way. And after 2 years of waiting, the government has basically decided to do nothing. And that this was like the opportunity. I thought there was a point where I thought we might make some progress. And it's disheartening for now, but I think it will happen later. And, you know, we've done all this before. We've done this with gay marriage. We've done it with gay adoption. We've done it with the age of consent for gay people. You know, we've won a lot of battles, but it just takes time. But the good news is, I think my readers are going to be the ones who will recognise that the system is broken and needs fixing. And I hope, that my voice can contribute to that somehow. Because this is what I do. I'm not a politician. I don't really like big marches, although I have marched twice this year already, for Black Lives Matter and for trans lives. But what I do and my power is my writing. And so it's my hope with my book that, I can affect change in some way. And I think a lot of my contemporaries do that as well. I think Holly Bawn is revolutionary. I think Louisa Neal is revolutionary. I think Patrick Ness is revolutionary. Angie Thomas is revolutionary. And I think we're very privileged to have the ear of young people.
It's also, it's a really trite thing to say. It's been said so many times before, but fiction lets you into individuals' lives and it lets you imagine yourself in someone else's perspective and reality. And I think there is so much of that missing from the wider, I'm loath to call it a debate, the wider conversation discussion that's going on through the media. I was sort of following on that tack, and I am looking for more questions from the audience, by the way. You almost make social media into its own character in the book, and I'm not going to go into more detail because people will understand what I mean by that when they've read it. But that character is ambiguous and ambivalent, and manipulative, but also capable of showing truths not found elsewhere. What do you make of social media at the moment? And do you think we need to have a healthier relationship with it? And if we do, how do we do that?
Have you watched The Social Dilemma on Netflix?
Not yet.
I watched that last night and I did. It's time for me. And it starts with you. It has to start with you. I really think I'm addicted. I think I'm fully addicted to that kind of dopamine spike that you get when you see how many people have liked your pictures on Instagram. I don't think I'm ready to go full cold turkey, but I've had to fully explore how Twitter in particular was impacting on my mental health. Maybe it's because I've reached a certain level of kind of recognition. I'm one of maybe sort of 10, 15 trans people who kind of has the media opportunities that I have. And it's just so horrible, and it's kind of, it feels sometimes like self-harm. I was asked to go on Pointless Celebrities last year and my episode went out. And afterwards, I was kind of going through Twitter, sort of looking at what people had said about me and, what I look like and what I sound like and what I was wearing. And you're just kind of why am I doing this? Why am I putting myself through this? I think Carol Cadwalla, the journalist from The Guardian, said it really well in her TED Talk in Silicon Valley. She said, these technologies were designed to bring us together, but actually they've torn us apart. Mm. And it just feels like everything feels really divided and everything feels really just tribal, and desperately, desperately unpleasant. And there have been times, when things got really, really bad on Twitter that I've come off. And then you realize that in real life, when you're walking down the street, I don't have people saying how I'm a dangerous predator who is a threat to women. That kind of doesn't happen when I'm bobbing into Marks and Spencer's to pick up some grapefruit. It just doesn't happen. And so these places have just become really rank. And you sort of think, why do you put yourself through it? And so my little step has been to delete them off my phone. Mm. There is something I think particularly sinister about these kind of messages getting to you in your bed, which is kind of such a safe space, and literally Twitter was becoming the bogeyman on literally at the side of my bed. I've decided it's definitely time to wean myself off of Facebook because I just think Mark Zuckerberg is just the worst. And I think that's the problem. I think these platforms are not taking responsibility for what they've done. I think they've created a monster, and the Frankenstein's monster has completely gotten away from them. But I do think that they created the monster, and I think they could probably stop it. But I think now they make too much money. And so I think they've become just vast, greedy things. But yeah, it's kind of, Pandora's box is open. The genie is out the bottle. We can't roll back society to a place before social media. So I guess what we need to do now is we need to massively re-educate ourselves. And because I do think they are, I'm starting to honestly think that the negatives are maybe outweighing the positives, particularly in terms of social media. I think the internet broadly is a wonderful thing, but I think social media, it has not been designed to make our lives better.
It absolutely hasn't. I have two more questions from the audience. First one, when you're writing and hit a standstill or a hurdle, how do you get past it?
This is not the best time to ask, because I've had a very difficult summer. There won't, and I've had to admit to my dear publishers now that there won't be a YA novel next year because I just haven't written one. It's really tough when, for the first time in over a decade, I just couldn't think of an idea that felt as good as Wonderland, Meat Market and Clean, which formed like a very loose kind of trilogy. And you want each novel to be better than the last or do something that the last novel didn't do. And so that's where I've gone a little stuck this year. So I guess my advice is you've got to let yourself off the hook. So this year, granted, this year has been an extraordinary year for everyone. I had to just do the things that I could do. So I worked on some TV shows. I worked on some scripts. I've started work on a slightly different project. You can't force it. And my other thing as well that I always say is, writing isn't just a person sat at a laptop or a person writing in a notebook. If I'm watching a film, that's work, because maybe I'm looking at how stories work. If I'm reading a novel, that's work. If I am, kind of putting together a Pinterest board of images that in some way inspire me, that's work as well. Even, back in the days where I would happily go to a gym, me being on a treadmill was kind of working, because all the time, my head was ticking along.
You actually, I think, need that. I mean, I don't know as well as you do, but I think you need that sort of down space, that thing we used to have when kids were bored, and you would be lost in your own world for a couple of hours, and that's a really important space that actually social media has kind of encroached upon. I have a second question, which these have come from the same person, and they say that this is the important one, and I am inclined to agree with them. What are your optimum snacks when writing?
So I'm for now, I'm back in my office. I rent a little office space in the next town because I like having a commute. I'm not very good at, which is potentially why there isn't a novel for next year, because lockdown was not good. And so what I tend to do is I keep very boring office hours. So I kind of get to the office for sort of 10, half 10. I have a little coffee, and then I stop for lunch at about midday. And then my little treat is I get myself a little cake. Around 2:30-ish, I will have my little cup of tea and like little chocolate crispy or something. I think an afternoon bun is essential.
It is self-care in one of the most straightforward ways, for sure. Back to my questions, although folks send them in because we are going to be running out of time soon. So we've talked very seriously about a lot of stuff in your book, yes. But also you have excellent villains. and every heroine needs a great villain. What is fun about writing the baddies? What brought you the most joy writing the ones in Wonderland?
Oh, I mean, it's super fun. I think, to go back slightly to Clean, where I actually kind of took the natural villain and made her the main character. And it's such a cliche, but villains are the best fun to write because you're dealing with someone who often has no filter. And Paisley is our Queen of Hearts character, and she was such a blast because she is a sociopath. She is absolutely a law unto herself, but it's really fun to kind of imagine because obviously like somebody who's not a sociopath, broadly, I want people to like me. Like, I don't want people to hate me. Paisley doesn't have that chip. So she will do exactly what it is she wants to do because she just doesn't care whether people like her or not. And because she is the heiress to a vast plastics fortune, it doesn't really matter because she'll buy new friends. And actually she's surrounded herself with kind of minions who hang off her every word. That said, I don't think any author would want to write a one-dimensional villain who is just evil for the sake of being evil. Like, even when you look at your sort of classic kind of villains, like the evil queen in Snow White, there is a really interesting and compelling feminist reading of that, which is, she's a powerful woman who fears other female rivals. That's really compelling, and she particularly fears a younger, more beautiful female rival. So that's when a villain gets interesting. So anybody can do just like a scary villain. But what's way more fun is saying, okay, but how has she come to this point? And is there any driver behind it? And again, I'm not going to reveal, Paisley's personal history, but there is a sadness there, I mean, she's a ridiculous character in some ways, but when you learn her secret, you realize, oh wow, kind of like that's dark, kind of, and it kind of slightly makes sense of why she is the way she is.
Absolutely. I have another question coming in from the audience. I'm going to read the comment first and then give you the question because the comment's lovely. This is fabulous, by the way. If I was still working in the school's library service, I'd make sure every high school stocked your books. That's a glowing endorsement if ever I heard one. And this person would like to know what you're reading at the moment, Juno.
I've just finished one. So I've kind of taken I go on holiday tomorrow. That's right. I'm leaving the country. So I've just finished the most recent Louise O'Neill, who's a friend of mine. So she has written, it's like a thriller for adults. It's a very twisty, turny. It's kind of like true crime meets Gone Girl on a remote Irish island. And I would really, really recommend it. And like Louise, it feels very truthful and very uncomfortable, which I think is what she does really, really well. For my holiday reading this year, I'm going to tell you what I've packed.
Excellent.
I have packed a book called Boy Parts by an author called Eliza Clark. It's a debut, and I've read the first couple of chapters, and already it's so up my street. It's really dark-sided. I love it. I've also packed Circe by Madeline Miller because I'm going to a Greek island, so reading Circe felt right. And I've got Discovery of Witches as well, which I've never read. So I just fancied something kind of, bit supernatural, bit romantic, kind of, because I've just rewatched the Twilight series, so I fancied something along those lines.
Excellent. The questions are coming in thick and fast now. Hiya, what would you say to a 20-year-old who wants to find a space to write in the young adult market, but currently only really writes fan fiction? And also, do you see value in fan fiction? And do you ever engage with any written about your work?
And fan fiction is amazing. I started out with fan fiction back in the 90s when we didn't call it fan fiction because the internet didn't really exist. I started out writing Doctor Who fan fiction. And of course, last year, I literally got to write Doctor Who fan fiction when my Doctor Who novel came out. So I absolutely think there is value in fan fiction, because as well, the more you write, the better at it you get. And I know with every fibre of my being that if I had been 25 years younger, I would have started out on fan fiction on Wattpad, whether it be Pretty Little Liars fan fiction, or I'm trying to think what else I've been really into. Oh, it could have been anything. I love so many sort of nerdy things, but I think as well, we all beg, borrow, and steal from our influences. You know, you could say, you know, that my novel Cruel Summer was kind of basically an homage to point horror, which is what I grew up reading. You know, Say Her Name, borrowed from a lot of the Japanese and Korean horror films I was watching, like The Ring and The Grudge. You know, we're all writing fan fiction, all of us. There are no original ideas. Just we are all indebted to artists who have gone before us. Have I engaged with any fan fiction of people that I've read? Only if it gets kind of pointed out to me. So if people kind of flag things, I will dip in. I think as well, because I've not written fantasy, which lends itself better to fan fiction. I don't know if there's been a lot of fan fiction. I love fan art. I get sent a lot of fan art, which is always incredibly touching.
And often disgustingly talented. Yeah. Were you nervous about writing a protagonist that is mean and clean? This person asking because they say that you don't see it in many books.
No, I think so. With each novel, you want to do something that challenges you as well, because you never want to be in that position where you are churning them out or kind of repeating yourself. And with clean, you know, I'd just written potentially my best behaved novel, which was Margot and Me, which is, you know, I wanted to write something that my mum would enjoy, and she did. That's her favourite of my books. And I wanted to write something a bit more gentle and a weepy as well. I wanted to write like a Sunday afternoon novel. But then next, I was like, right, I need something completely different. I need something that's a million miles away from Margot. And Lexi, the protagonist in Clean, had been brewing in my head for a while, like just this incredibly privileged nightmare child. And she'd been in my head for a while, and it was just about what to do with her. But I thought that was an interesting challenge for myself, which is, can you create a monster that people love? And it was funny because as soon as I started writing Lexi, I loved her. And she's saying these outrageous things. But at the same time, she's addicted to heroin and she's going cold turkey. She's in a rehab facility. And so that was kind of she was a challenge to me, and she was a challenge for the reader, which is, are you going to turn your back on this girl? You know she's a heroin addict. You know she's in rehab. Are you going to give up on her? Because kind of, you know, if you had a friend in that situation, would you give up on your friend?
There's something really in that about, like, we don't have to like everyone we read, and we don't have to like everyone we're compelled by, but we do have to be interested in them and have empathy for them, I think is really important. We have a lovely comment in from Laura Blundy-Jones, who says that she adores your books, and she first saw you speak in Melbourne during your Clean tour. She works in a bookstore as a YA expert, and I think there's a word missing, but I think she's saying she insists on stocking the whole trilogy, which is great. We're going to nip back to a question from me. Keep the questions coming, people. We've got about 10 minutes left, slightly under. I am wondering, just coming back to Wonderland and picking up on what you were saying earlier, actually, lovely. When you're writing such an iconic story or playing with such an iconic story and such well-known and well-loved characters, do other influences come into play? What are some of the book and cultural references you think are relevant to, or that you nod to in the book?
Well, it's funny because, I mean, that's where I'm at the moment with trying to sort of give myself a kick up the bum to write the next YA novel. so what I'm doing is I've almost circled back to why I loved YA in the first place. And I think I need to have a renaissance. I need to go back and figure out the things I've loved, the novels I've loved, and the authors I've loved, and also the films and music that I love. You know, I always think, you know, that if you take a bit of Buffy the Vampire Slayer and a bit of Heathers, a bit of Cruel Intentions, a little bit of Clueless, you know, that these are the things that have made me who I am. You know, I don't think I would have written my first novel if it hadn't been for my love of those things. And so I tend to steer back, but there is always the DNA of those things in my work. You know, you know, there is something very Cruel Intentions about Wonderland in particular. Clean had a really sort of the sharpness of Heather's. Meat Market was more of a Cinderella story, I guess, like a sort of a revamped kind of, and there was a bunch of those in the 80s, kind of about fish out of water stories, kind of like Working Girl, for example. And so it's all those things, and sort of going back to your childhood loves. I think your first loves are the ones which endure the most.
Absolutely. I was actually thinking about that today, thinking about this event, and remembering that the YA novel, because I'm slightly older than you, so YA wasn't really a thing when I was growing up. But we had Lois Duncan, who's the woman who wrote the book that I Know What You Did Last Summer was based on.
Yeah.
She's amazing.
I won't say which book it is, but I've just, this summer, I desperately tried to get my hands on the rights to a Lois Duncan novel. Ooh. And unfortunately the rights were already sold, but I really wanted to adapt one of her old novels.
I loved her books. Another question from the audience. Do you ever find yourself subconsciously censoring any content in your novels because of your YA audience? Or do you believe there should be no topics that are off limit?
I mean, read clean. I mean, there is nothing. And I just think it's all been done. You know, if I felt I was in any way sort of on the vanguard, you know, I would be like, ooh, but like Melvin Burgess wrote Junk like 22 years ago. Like before that, Judy Blume, you know, was pushing so many boundaries in like the 70s, you know. If you can think of any sort of taboo, it has been covered in YA fiction. It has been done. There's one that I don't think has been, that potentially I might look at next. There's a possibility I might come to it next. But not just for the sake of shock value, but for the sake of kind of, sometimes I think things are only taboo because of like quite conservative attitudes. And I think we should be shaking up. I think, you know, we should be sort of challenging myths and stereotypes and looking at prejudices and, you know, and sort of, and asking those questions and having those conversations. There was one thing in Clean that my editor asked to be removed, and that was because she felt it would derail the conversation about the book. Basically, when Lexi is massively coming down off heroin, and so she is in a almost feral state, and she said something outrageously offensive, and that was, again, this notion, you know, that she's lashing out. You know, she is in a vicious, she's been cornered. But my editor just felt there might not be a way back from it, and that the whole conversation about the novel could become focused on one line in the book. And so we agreed as author and editor, let's not screw the novel over literally one line of dialogue.
Absolutely. It's a line you've got to walk, because publishing's a business as well, isn't it? And you've got to take that into consideration. We have maybe 3 minutes left. I'm going to ask you one quick final question. Do you have, and I'm sorry because this is really cheesy, but I had to ask it this way. Do you have any plans to take your Alice through the Looking Glass?
No.
well,
You say that, but we've sold the rights to Wonderland Clean and Meat Market, have all been sold to one TV production company.
Oh, wow.
And they have really ambitious plans for this story in a way that I had never perceived it happening like this. And so there is huge potential for the three girls, Lexi, Yana, and Alice. There is every possibility we're going to put them in one TV show all together, kind of facing off against each other in a way that they've done in these novels. So actually, you know, the books are going to be there, and the TV show will tell those stories, but we also have the potential to go through the looking glass. But there's 3 is such a round number, and, you know, I've never done a trilogy or a series, and I love the fact that Clean, Meat Market, and Wonderland are the strangest trilogy. They don't work like a trilogy, and yet they also kind of do. And I quite like it because I don't really think there's been anything else quite like it. I don't think. There probably has, but...
I think that is a fantastic place to leave it. Juno, thank you so much. It's been such a joy. Also, audience out there who we can't see, I really want to say thank you to you guys as well. Excellent questions, really lovely to get you involved. If you would like to buy a copy of the excellent Wonderland, yes, we are both now going to model this book. You can do so online from the Wigtown Book Festival bookshop. I think you'll find the link either in the YouTube, at the bottom on the YouTube page, or on the homepage of the Wigtown Festival website. Also, we are delighted this year that we're able to bring Wigtown Book Festival to you online for free. If you are able to and you would like to, please consider making a donation to the Wigtown Festival website to support us to continue bringing great events to as many people as we can. Again, there is a link on YouTube and there is a link below the donation button on the Wigtown website. All that remains for me to say is, Juno, it's always such a pleasure. That was a lovely way to spend an hour reasonably late on a Friday night for me.
I had a cocktail. It was fine. This is
all good.
My Fridays.
Thank you so much. I hope everyone out there enjoyed this as much as we did. And we hope to see you at another event later on in the festival. Bye-bye.
Take care.